Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome back to Winmau TV. First one of the lockdown specials, and we've got the asset, Paul Nicholson, from home in his darts room. Paul, first of all, how are you keeping?
Not too bad. It's just over 2 weeks since I started to self-isolate, and it hasn't been easy. I'm a bit like a Labrador when it comes to getting outside. I like to go and run around, and of course I'm allowed to do that once a day. But uh, just as the new golf season started, I got myself out and I played Tilgate Forest in Crawley, and I thought that it was just such a breath of fresh air to actually get the clubs out again. And I played a couple of days later, and then I got the notice that all the golf courses were shutting in the local area. So that was a bit disappointing, but I'm genuinely keeping okay, looking at the positives and utilising the time as best I can. But obviously, it's not ideal.
I suppose the key is to try and keep yourself busy and not think about the fact you are actually in lockdown.
Very much so. I think for me, I'm as everybody knows, especially some of the players who have hung around me for the last 10 years, they know I'm quite regimented. So I tend to know what I'm going to do before I actually do it. The night before, I'm always planning the next day's food. I'm always planning the next day's fitness. The next day's practice. I've always got everything written down. And that plays into what I'm doing right now very well. And if I can keep a routine, I can stay pretty sane. I can keep myself on an even keel. I do suffer with anxiety, so I'm struggling with that a little bit, being cooped up a bit more. But I'm utilising a thing called Centre by Chris Hemsworth, a fitness app, because I can't go to the gym. And I think if I didn't have that, I would be going stir crazy. I'm doing some boxing training. I'm doing a lot of skipping. I'm doing some really good fitness work and lots of yoga. So I'm probably going to look like Brad Pitt from Snatch by the end of this lockdown, which wouldn't be a bad thing. But yeah, I think as well as being physically fit, I'm trying to stay mentally fit as well and ready for whenever we get started again.
Practice routine while you're at home as well. How's that going?
It's not so much been practice. It's been me trying to figure out how to simplify my action a little bit more, because my last year on tour, I was starting to twist the dart a little bit in my fingers, which worked most of the time, but there were too many matches and too many darts where it would slip, and it wasn't the dart's fault. It was actually me positioning and my fingers wrong. So what I've decided to do during this time, where I've got a little bit more time to experiment, is to try and simplify that process and get rid of the twist in the dart. Every day that I do it, it starts to feel more natural, and I think there could be some exciting stats ahead when I get back into to playing darts, whether it be on the Challenge Tour or next year's Q School, because I get the feeling I've uncovered something that might be very handy if I can just keep this work ethic going.
You touched on that. Obviously, we'll go back and revisit Q School. Considering you went there with very little match preparation and general preparation, you almost came up trumps again, didn't you?
Almost. And the thing that was really good for me was having Jeff Smith in my corner. And it wasn't just because he qualified and was able to basically be my cheerleader on day 4. It wasn't that. It was being around someone eternally positive. And that's the kind of thing I need. Too many times in my career, I've found myself in a negative situation, and it's had a ripple effect on my career for 3 or 4 months. So being around Jeff, it's no coincidence that I did well. But I was also hanging around with Fallon Sherrick and Rhys Hayden and some other lovely people like Raymond Stanley, and they were really positive. And I think when we were in that group, we were feeding off each other's positivity, and we're all gearing each other up for their matches. At Q School, I felt pretty uncomfortable on day 1 because I looked at how many people were there and I was shocked. But I had a really quick chat with Jeff, and we said, look, we've got to adapt to this. We can't afford to make excuses. We'll let everybody else make excuses and we'll just bulldoze through this. He did so, and I got pretty close. But I think that message has fed forward in 2020. If you look at a situation and start making excuses and start getting negative, you're not going to get anywhere. So for me right now, it's about adapting and doing the best with the situation that I possibly can. It didn't work out at Q School, but there were some games that I played properly. And especially in the first leg of Q School, where I went out in 11 darts and I was on a 10, I thought, if I can do this with a bit of adrenaline pumping, I can probably do this. It wasn't meant to be. I walked away with my head held high, disappointed still, but ready for the next challenge.
Is that hunger and desire still there to be a full-time professional? Because we know you enjoy the media side of it and the media work, but is that drive there as it's always been?
You know, I remember something Winmau said a few seasons ago about why he didn't go back to Q school and try to return to the top. He said that the fire had gone out of his belly. Well, if that was the same case for me, I would be here, sitting here as a darts pundit, analyst, or whatever you want to call it, and just not wanting to play professional darts again. But with me, the fire is still burning inside. I still feel that there's a lot of players out there that aren't as good as me. And it's not because they're bad. I just think that I have something else to offer, whether it be a little bit of extra passion, a little bit of extra drive, work ethic, whatever you want to call it. I still think it's still, it's definitely still there. All I need now is just to have the right vehicle to move forward. And not every career is the same. If you fall off the horse, yes, you get back on, but not every horse starts to trot really quickly to start with. You might just have to have a little look around before you start galloping again. And I think that's what's happening with me.
Looking ahead as well, the season is going to be interesting when we finally return to playing. Best and worst case scenarios. I suppose the best case is sometime in June we can get playing some maybe behind closed doors Pro Tour stuff again. Worst case scenario, August, maybe September time. I guess looking at all the other people that are planning, what does this do for the season?
Well, it makes it memorable for one thing. We're not going to forget this season. I mean, all you've got to do is remember the UK Open in 2018. We're never going to forget that for obvious reasons. There was nobody there. And of course, Gary Anderson winning the title will always be memorable, but we'll probably remember that more for the situation around that victory. 2020 already is memorable, admittedly for what's going on with COVID-19. But I want to remember how this year started so far. And that's with incredible quality. We've had 120 plus average from Peter Wright. We've had bulldozing averages from Ian White, Nathan Aspinall, and the amount of brilliant finals we've already had this season in barely any tournaments. That's what we should be focusing on and praying that we get back to normality as soon as possible. As for a best case scenario, I'm going to remain mega positive because my birthday falls on the Budapest weekend. So I'm still going to hope that Budapest goes ahead in about 6 weeks. Because when that came on the calendar, everybody was really, really excited to take it to a new country. And, you know, that's my job, is to try and input the passion that we feel at a venue to the fans on PCTV and around the world. And that was something I was really looking forward to. So I'm still hopeful that we may get there. Very, very small percentage though. Worst case scenario, I think, is probably the World Grand Prix. I'd like to think that is the worst case scenario. Can you imagine a 2020 not playing at all? I mean,
no, that's unthinkable.
It is still possible. I mean, we don't know what's going to happen. We have to say that. We could go through the whole season and the next one could be the Worlds, which would be awful. Not just for darts, but for sport, because everybody's missing it. I hope everybody's enjoying their marble racing out there on YouTube and watching all sorts of dog videos. But I think realistically, we are looking at somewhere in the summer around. I'll tell you what would be the perfect way to come back if it was June. It would be the World Cup. I think the World Cup has been so good the last few seasons that would be a really good introduction back into big stage darts for a lot of players to get themselves into Germany and go wallop. So I think the World Cup is realistic, but I don't have all the information at hand as to what is going on with the government, with the figures with COVID-19, and obviously with the promotional stuff that the PDC Europe and all of the sponsors are doing. I don't have that information. I'm just guessing here, and I'm guessing optimistically.
Just going to pick up on a few things that you said there. First of all, the match play is obviously on the horizon. Do you think the match play is a genuine concern right now? And two, off that, could we go into the match play having played no ranking events before that, do you think, where they maybe have to change the qualifying criteria, maybe go to the top 32 for a one-off year, and all the scenarios around that?
Yeah, it'll be a tough call for the PDC to make, I think, because we know how dear they hold the World Match Play, as do the fans and the broadcasters. So if the opportunity arises where they can play the World Match Play in its normal time slot, I think they will go for that. In relation to whether we will, I think we should be okay for the World Match Play. I think there's enough time for us to negotiate this crisis so that we can actually get stuff done and be playing the World Match Play with fans in the crowd. That's my 2 cents on that. As far as the playing competitive environment for the participants, this is a tough one because there are players already this year who have staked their claim for a spot outside the top 32, like Ryan Searle, and this is something that he really, really wants. So I personally would keep it the same as it is right now. I think it's still pretty fair, but they're going to have to do something about the points that drop off. The people who have got lots of points to defend between when we went into lockdown and when we come back, they've had no opportunity to defend those ranking points. So should they be penalised for that? Probably not. But how they negotiate this with the rankings is a nightmare of ridiculous proportions. And Andy Scott, who is the resident boffin at the PDPA, he has got an algorithm nightmare coming his way, potentially, and I wouldn't want his job. What is the right answer? I don't know. If it was right now, I'd say take the top 16 and take the 16 seeds outside, or 16 qualifiers outside. But there's going to be more time, isn't there? There's going to be more ranking points lost. There's going to be more people suffering because of this in a rankings perspective. And as each week passes, it gets even harder to negotiate that. So, yeah, I wouldn't want to be those guys, and I don't have the right answer.
Again, looking at the calendar as well, I think it's pretty much going to be impossible to fit 9.5 months into 5. I'm guessing from a player's point of view that you'd always want the ranking events prioritised over stuff maybe like the World Series, the Champions League that's obviously non-ranked and stuff like that. Is that the priorities to make sure all the ranking events take place and then try and fit the rest of the stuff in after that?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a tricky fit this year. I think a lot of dart players already are mentally equipped for a very, very busy period where there could be darts every week when we come back. They're going to have to squeeze in as much for the broadcasters because, let's face it, that's where the money comes from, and for the sponsors. But I think ranking stuff has to take precedent. Something like the Champions League, for instance, might have to be axed for the year because it's not ranked. There's not a great deal of players involved. So that could be the first sacrificial lamb or sacrificial tofu, depending on whether you're a vegan. You got to be careful these days with what you say. But yeah, it's a difficult fit. I think European tours, they're important. I think Players' Championships may have to be axed, which is going to be tough because you can't have darts every single day. You just can't do that. I think a lot of pro tours may go to midweek because, let's face it, a majority of the guys in the top 128 are full-time professionals. And if you do have a job on the side of playing darts, well, it's going to be a really tricky fit for you. But TV events will have to be prioritised. The Premier League will be prioritised because of revenue. And as you can see already from the calendar, they've made room for them. And how brilliant is it? We're going to have finals night in the Toon.
At the moment.
At the minute, I'm staying positive. Newcastle can have finals night. It's the only final that Newcastle's had in a long time. So let's hope they get it. But not just a rankings nightmare, but a scheduling nightmare, which I'm sure the PDC, as well as the fact that they're doing lots of content for social media at the minute, they will be working extremely hard in the back to make sure that everybody's happy, whether you be a fan, a sponsor, promoter, or indeed a broadcaster.
Paul, it's an absolute pleasure talking to you here across Skype, the modern technology that we live in. Stay safe, mate. As I say, we all know there's a lot on the line here, but stay safe, stay positive. Thanks for joining us here at Winmau.
No problem. Just a little message to everybody out there. Take the government's advice. Don't do anything silly. Don't do what they did in Derby and host a party. Don't go and see your relatives unless it's absolutely necessary. Just stay indoors, stay healthy, stay smart, and we'll all get through this together.